Good evening and welcome to this October 23rd meeting of the Bloomington Planning Commission. The Planning Commission advises the City Council on development proposals, development standards, long-range planning, and transportation issues. Some items before the Planning Commission are study items where we will not take formal action, while other items before the Planning Commission are public hearings where we do take public action. And we do encourage public testimony on our public hearings. However, we do have one this evening. Item number 1 is a public hearing. So if you'd like to testify on that, you're welcome to do so here at City Hall, or you can do so following the instructions that are on your screen. On some items before the Planning Commission, we have final decision-making authority, where other items the City Council will make the final decision and the Planning Commission acts in an advisory capacity. The Planning Commission is made up of 7 volunteer residents of the City of Bloomington. 6 of us are here this evening, so we do have a quorum. I'll ask everyone in the chambers now to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will move right into item number 1. The City of Bloomington is the applicant for our annual Miscellaneous Issues Ordinance. Ms. Hestbech, you have the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. So I'm here to present the final miscellaneous issues for 2025. And just to review again what miscellaneous issues is for new commissioners, it's a project we do annually that's kind of a hodgepodge of different ordinances, whether that be cleanup items or policy change ordinances that don't warrant their own whole project and public hearing, so we kind of put them together for review. Here's a quick timeline just for remembering. I was here on September 18th and we had a study session to talk about the policy change items. I then went to council on September 29th. We have a public hearing tonight, and then there will be a final public hearing at council on November 17th. So this is a table of all the cleanup items within the project, and there are a lot. There's 26 A through Z. Except for we dropped Ordinance P at this time, so really it's A through O and Q through Z. I'm not going to go through each of these individually because that would be a lot, but if you do have questions, I have extra slides, and we can talk about any of these individually if you want to. I just have one example of what a cleanup item looks like. So this is Ordinance A, and there's just a grammatical error here, and we added an or, and so that's kind of an example of what a cleanup item looks like. As far as the policy change items go, here is a shorter list of just 6. Since I was here at the study session, we dropped a couple, so we took the double public hearing removal out for now, and then we moved one of the items into the cleanup section. So we will go through these ones individually. So Ordinance AA is changing the exterior lighting section slightly. It needs to be updated to specify when lighting plans are required, because not every project that involves the installation of lighting necessitates a whole photometric plan. And then additionally, staff propose adding a section to make sure that maintenance of lighting is in good repair and kept up. Ordinance BB came from the office conversion study from earlier this year, and this ordinance basically is to allow multifamily residential uses with a combined minimum level of non-residential floor area in the 4 zoning districts that you see on the screen. Ordinance CC has a few different parts. So first, we currently have a process for appeals to certificates of appropriateness, and that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. The code currently says that appeals of the Planning Commission's decision would go to a public hearing at the Planning Commission, but that's inaccurate. It should go to council to be decided on. Additionally, for the appeals of decision of certificates of appropriateness, there's currently no fee listed in code, so the fee should be $220, mirroring other appeal fee costs. And then lastly, as part of the Streamlining Development Project, we established the process for appealing a variance decision by the Planning Commission, but forgot to add it to the code. The appeal process for that would include a public hearing at council. Ordinance DD is related to garage height limits. So currently, the accessory structure rules do not allow a garage or accessory structure to be taller than the principal dwelling, which can be challenging in some cases. So staff is proposing a maximum of 15 feet in height for the accessory structure and garages that do exceed the height of the principal dwelling. Ordinance EE is proposing to remove a statement requiring architectural unity, a standard that we have for commercial buildings. So currently we require non-residential structures constructed on one site to match style, color, scheme, and staff believes that this kind of limits design flexibility and creativity and creates an unnecessary burden for the developer or the business. And then lastly, we have Ordinance F. So currently code requires an 8-foot sidewalk along minor collector roads, but the city engineer has agreed that this could be reduced to 6 feet when not abutting the curb. This amendment is intended to right-size pedestrian facilities along lower volume roadways. And after Planning Commission and Council feedback, language was added to this to provide the city engineer discretion as to when those sidewalks may be reduced from 8 to 6 feet. So with that, I have the action on the screen and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hestbech. Questions for staff? Seeing none, I will then open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the chambers who wishes to testify to this item. Seeing no one coming forward, is there anybody online?
All participants online are staff.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I will look then for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 6-0. We'll move to discussion. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Although I'm for item EE, it's the only one I wanted to bring up, I think that there was a lot of discussion around that particular one on City Council, or am I mixing them up? I guess I didn't have this notebook here that night. Remind me again how everyone felt about it, the architectural standards for adjoining commercial buildings.
Can we back the slide up also to the double E?
I'll start, Commissioner Cunningham. I believe I was blowing a trumpet on my way out the door, seeing Ordinance EE. I'm an enormous supporter of this. We've seen development applications come before us, and we've had to ask the applicant to change because they wanted to build what they would consider a modern building, but because of the code, they have to actually meet the standards of the buildings that are already there. And so as our infrastructure has aged, like many has, we are then asking them, no, you must meet the standards of the 1980s, not the 2020s. Sorry about that. And so I believe this ordinance addresses that, so that we're giving developers more flexibility, in my opinion, by supporting that ordinance.
Thank you for the refresher. Nothing, unless anyone else says anything they want to talk about. All right, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I noticed here is that I was glad we tabled the ordinance on the double public hearing. We had a lot of conversation, and it was a very nuanced conversation about 5 or 6 different options that maybe should not have the double public hearing. And I think that deserved a deeper dive if we're going to go down that road. So I was pleased to see that removed, and I'm supportive of everything that remains here. Any other comments? If none, I'll look for a motion. Commissioner Linay.
I was just going to ask if they could advance the slide again. I will make that motion also.
Please.
I move to recommend adopting ordinances A through O and Q through Z as included in the meeting packet, thereby amending chapters 6, 10, 14, 15, 17, 18, 21, 22, and Appendix A of the City Code.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve this first motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Commissioner Linay.
I move to recommend adopting ordinances AA through FF, as included in the meeting packet, thereby amending Chapter 21 and Appendix A of the City Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this second motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 6-0. This item will move to the City Council as a public hearing on November 17th. Thank you, Ms. Hestbech. We'll move then to item number 2, which is a review of the official building height map of the City of Bloomington. The city is the applicant, and Mr. Ramler-Olson has the staff report.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Ramler-Olson.
That was quick. That was almost late.
The Vikings are on. I don't know if that influences it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Yeah, so this is a study session looking at the official building height map of the City of Bloomington. Can I advance a slide? There we go. And part of this is going to be going through the history of what our current height regulations, or the regulations are for building heights in the city of Minneapolis. I'm sorry. Yeah, holy Lord. I made that mistake earlier today, so I apologize with a caller on the phone. So that was terrific. And I haven't gotten it out of my system, apparently. Anyways, let's not waste any more time. So it's going to be looking at the history of how we regulate building heights in the City of Bloomington, and as part of that, we're going to be proposing, or staff has prepared some proposals to adjust those building heights, just for your consideration. And then we'll also be looking at some other aspects that govern building heights in the city. So, backgrounds. Should be background. I'm on a roll today. So the regulatory framework that currently controls building heights in the City of Bloomington will jump all the way back to 2010, when an ordinance was adopted that where you see our current framework being adopted. Part of that ordinance was limiting the casting of shadows on protected residential properties. There's a definition of what's considered a protected residential property in the staff report for you to consider. There's also building step backs. That's where you increase in height, and there's a greater step back in the building envelope from the whatever you're stepping back from. That could be a pedestrian street in this instance, or it could be other protected residential properties. Again, going back to that framework. And then that last bullet is the map-based height regulation, which is what we're considering tonight. So those are all the regulations on building height within the City of Bloomington. And this is our current building height map. There are 5 categories right now that set the limits for building height. The lowest is 3 stories, 50 feet, the lesser of which. And then it goes all the way to no limit. So it can build however tall you want, but you also have to comply with those other regulations that I mentioned, or those other standards that I mentioned, the shadow casting and whatnot. And then there are other building height regulations associated with proximity to the airport that need to be considered. So those are imposed by the Minneapolis-St. Paul zoning code, or yes, sorry, Minneapolis St. Paul Airport zoning code. And so we considered a lot of information as we were studying this issue. Going all the way to the top of the land use guide plan that's in our 2040 comprehensive plan, or our most recent comprehensive plan. And what we focused on, or what we teased out of that information, was medium density and high density residential properties or areas of the city. Those were considered among staff for, how do we regulate buildings within those areas. And then we also looked at planning areas that have been the focus of planning efforts. So this is a map showing the boundaries, or the areas of those studies. So Norman Lake District Plan, the Penn American District Plan, the Lindale Avenue Suburban Retrofit Plan area, and 98th Street Station area, and of course the South Loop District Plan area. And then completed in 2017 by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, a study of neighborhood commercial areas throughout the city. 8 were identified, and they're included within the most recent comprehensive plan. And so we looked at those, and then we examined the land uses of each commercial area identified. And from that, we came up with, our staff came up with this proposed height limit map for changes to what we saw were compatible with the land use and those planning studies that I identified earlier. The framework that we utilized, or that we adopted, or the approach that we adopted when we formulated that map, was looking at, again, medium density residential areas. There were a lot of areas that are guided medium density residential that are limited to 2 stories or 40 feet. And based on the description of the medium density residential land use within the comprehensive plan, staff felt it was appropriate to have each area that is guided that way to have a minimum height limit of at least 3 stories or 50 feet, which, the lesser of 2 of each. And we also made exceptions based on the context of where these areas are located. Are they proximate to a major intersection? Were they examined as part of an earlier planning effort? So in which case the minimum heights actually might be greater than the 3 stories or 50 feet. And then the same approach was applied to high density residential areas. And then we also looked at max building heights within and near planning areas, or areas of those planning studies, to reflect the goals and the vision articulated within those plans. So this is an example of kind of how that worked. Starting out with the current building height limits, highlighting those properties that are high density residential or guided high density residential or medium density residential, and then also considering, looking at that third panel, the planning area that might be nearby or within, within the city, and looking at that land use guidance and what was intended for, the extent of that planning area, and then coming up with a proposed building height limit for the city, using this sort of logic framework. And then, within the staff report, staff highlights some additional considerations that are germane to this conversation. So there is a relationship with what we're proposing to the incentives for affordable housing in the OHO, Opportunity Housing Ordinance. My apologies. We considered that, and we considered that with our colleagues in the HRA. And we came to the conclusion that we didn't observe any conflicts between those OHO incentives to provide affordable housing. Right now, to qualify for those incentives, for instance, for the height bonus, you need to meet minimum affordability targets. But that's about where it ends. It doesn't incentivize going any deeper into affordability. So you would still, and it wouldn't conflict with what we're proposing because you would still get that additional height. So we didn't see any issues with its relationship to the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. And it's important to consider that, the proposed changes that staff have highlighted on what we've prepared aren't necessarily going to materialize in buildings meeting those height limits. There are still those zoning standards that were mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that would still need to be met. So shadow casting, and then additional development standards that the city uses or imposes on new developments, so off-street parking, landscaping, etc. And then there's also market forces that are influencing the shape of development, and that may influence buildings not getting to those height limits that are being proposed. And then the state building code that needs to be considered, as that regulates building height based on construction type, occupancy type, fire suppression systems, a variety of considerations. So the next steps for this process are, there's no formal motion required because this is a study session, but we will be taking feedback from you all and presenting this as well as any changes to to the map that we would then present to council on November 17th. And then after that, taking all that feedback, we would prepare an ordinance to be considered sometime in late December and January for public hearings in front of Planning Commission and City Council, respectively. So there are some questions that staff are prepared to kick off this discussion because this is a study item, and I could certainly read them, and we can go one by one, or however you propose to address these questions. Otherwise, it could be more free-flowing conversation, and I'm also happy to answer questions. So just starting off the first one, do you agree with staff's proposed amendments to the official building height map? And, why or why not? We really appreciate that feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Ramler-Olson. Let's start with that first question. Thoughts on the amendments to the official building height map? Commissioner Linay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering, can you go back to the slide that has the plus?
Okay.
That one.
Yes, certainly.
I have to admit, as I was reading through the materials, I found this confusing concept to grasp. So I want to make sure I understand what it is we're talking about here. So if we take the first map, the second map, the third map, which equals the fourth map, the one thing I don't understand is how in the proposed building height limits, for example, we get to the orange would be 6 stories, 80 feet tall, correct?
Chair, Commissioner, yes.
Okay. But the plan, I guess what I'm not understanding is the overlay between the planning area and the area that was decided, like why one area was selected versus another. So for example, I'm assuming this is Cedar Avenue, right? If you're going north on Cedar Avenue in that block, why is the one that's shaped, for lack of a better description, like Oklahoma on its side? Why isn't the green part also orange? Like what's the logic on that Do you see what I'm saying? Anyone?
Oh.
See, so I'm just having a hard time understanding how the decision was made, like specifically on where the limits would end on from one to the next.
Can I reply? Or
Please.
did you want to?
No, please.
Oh, okay. Yes, Chair, Commissioner. So it was proximity to that intersection that was considered. So it's a major intersection, and it's had a lot of attention devoted to it by other divisions within community development. There, so it is a prime location for redevelopment, and getting closer to that intersection, allowing building heights to increase, seeing that as an asset to being closer to that intersection, and then shortening building heights as you move away, but up Cedar, still keeping it, still offering those building heights, and in accordance with the framework that we adopted for high density residential, as you'll see on what we're proposing. But it really was that proximity to the intersection that influenced what we saw was an appropriate building height limit for development in that area.
Okay, so there isn't a specific reason, for example, why that the panhandle of Oklahoma is not included in that. Just as an example, I'm not overly fixated on that particular space. I'm just trying to understand how the decisions were made when, for example, across the street, that is listed as the 6 stories, 80 feet. So it's just trying to get a better understanding about how the decision is made on where to make the cutoff.
Yes, Chair, Commissioner, that that panhandle portion of the geometry looked like a good cutoff point for, again, stepping down those building heights as you moved away from the intersection. That's not really there on the other side of Old Cedar. So again, that's where our treatment was. Granted, we also want to clarify that some of this stuff is a lot of art as well, as well as science. We're thinking what looks appropriate from a mapping perspective, but we're happy to get into more detail if that's what you're concerned about, is that maybe some of these decisions seem a little too arbitrary, and we could maybe strengthen some of the logic that we're applying to prepare the proposed heights.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I have a second unrelated question. And it's more to understand the process here. At what point do conversations with the schools happen? Obviously, if there were suddenly really large, significant increases in the high-density residential in this intersection or some of the other intersections, at what point do the conversations start to have with the schools? I ask this purely from a previous experience in another city where the explosion of high-density real estate was never, or residential real estate was never really coordinated with the schools, and they ended up with a huge school pressure down the road. And so just curious in the city of Bloomington where that happens in the process.
I will have to defer to Nick, Planning Manager Nick Johnson, with regard to that question.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Linné, for the question. So the point at which the school district reviews the city's land use plans and policies mostly occurs with the comprehensive plan. So they are one of our adjacent jurisdictions or affected jurisdictions. So every individual property that gets re-guided in our comp plan, they would typically get a notice of that, as well as when the city updates when it does its decennial update, its 10-year update. The Bloomington Public Schools certainly is one of the entities that we notify and engage along the way and review the future land use map changes. In addition to that, I'd like to emphasize that we have a pretty strong working relationship with the school district. So we definitely are trying to coordinate those things. I'm not going to say that they are involved in every discussion on every development project in Bloomington, but we are required under state law to notify them of comp plan changes. This is not a comprehensive plan amendment change. This is part of the zoning code, but just a heads up about that.
And if I may add to that, Chair and Commissioner, we have density standards that are associated with the land use guidance in the comprehensive plan. So the building heights do not change the amount of, or the density of units on the property. It just changes the building heights. So it kind of shifts with building heights. There's going to be probably unique arrangements of buildings on the properties, but it doesn't, what we're proposing does not touch those densities that we've articulated in the comprehensive plan.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Ramler-Olson, I have a question, and it's not really directly related to your first guiding question, but I'm struggling with the nomenclature of just say 3 stories 50 feet or 4 stories 60 feet. And what we're saying is the lesser of those two, correct?
Correct.
Why include the stories? So if we're allowing 60 feet, why do we then care if it's 4 stories or 5 stories or 6 stories? Why put that on top of it? If we're allowing 60 feet for shadow reasons, what does it matter how many stories there are?
Chair, I actually can't answer that because unfortunately within the meeting minutes where they adopted these height categories that are part of the map-based approach that the city uses when governing building heights, there was nothing in there that addressed this measurement that we've proposed, that's been part of practice with stories versus feet. Mm-hmm. You're right. I mean, if you can build up to a certain amount of feet, that's the main concern. That's ultimately dictating your height. It's not the stories, or that's a cleaner articulation of your height is the actual feet, not the stories. So I'm not sure if Planning Manager Nick Johnson can provide any more background on that. But again, this is. If we are looking at an ordinance that can amend these standards. So if you feel it's appropriate to actually change this to a system that's disregarding stories and more focused on feet, then this is the time to do it.
I would like to do that. I think we should look into that, especially, I mean, even 4 stories, 60 feet doesn't quite add up. I think you could easily get 5 stories out of a 60-foot building. So we're artificially lowering the number of stories and density you could get out of a building by this, what I consider to be redundant and ineffective nomenclature we have here. So I would ask that staff takes a look at that if my fellow commissioners agree, that we should take a look at that before this comes back to us to see if there's some reason I'm not thinking of as to why we're doing that. I'll look for further comments. Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Kind of following in that on I'm also in agreement that I think that just having a footage is a good framework for this. I would encourage staff to look at section 21.301.10-I-1, where we're measuring, it's the prescriptive part of the code that measures what is the actual height of a building. How do we level the playing field and say how it all goes? And it includes rooftop equipment, antennas, lightning rods as part of the structure height. And it might be beneficial if we're trying to drive density and overall heights of buildings to exempt certain aspects of the top of buildings that wouldn't throw major shadow if that's the primary concern in calculating building height. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham. Commissioner Issa.
Thank you, Chair. I definitely agree with you, Chair, on that. And also second what Commissioner Cunningham said on the exemptions of any obstacle or antenna that may not cause a shadow, for example. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Munster.
Thank you. I do want to agree, Mr. Chairman, that the number really, the foot height needs to be the dictating factor. I've seen this same standard in other states that I've worked in. It's common in planning terms, but it's exactly what you said. If what we care about is the overall height of the building, then let's just care about the overall height of the building. And then just to follow up on Commissioner Cunningham's comment about things that should not count. And I have not looked at that exact section, so I don't know what's in there, but I would also include not only antennas, but things like elevator penthouses as things that go above the roof line.
Thank you, Commissioner Munster. Mr. Ramler-Olson, we apologize for the detour there. Can we go back to your guiding question number 1 to ensure we have addressed your question?
Happy to. Oops. Oh, no.
Oh, the good stuff. Okay. All right, here we go. So do we agree with the proposed amendments? I do in principle agree with the proposed amendments to the official height map. I like that we're increasing the density at both Old Cedar Avenue and Old Shakopee Road. That's on my list of areas I'd like to see that. And also along Lyndale Avenue, I was pleased to see that as well. I did have one question though. Could we go back to the proposed map? So the Lyndale Avenue retrofit plan recommended 2 development nodes as sort of the catalyst for development on Lyndale. It was 98th and Lyndale, and I believe it was 84th and Lyndale.
Chair is 86th.
Thank you, 86th. Was there consideration to no limit at 86th and Lyndale as opposed to 80 feet?
Chair, between 98th and 86, 98th is the greater activity node. And sorry, 1 second. Let's take a look at what it, okay. So right now it's capped at 4 stories, 60 feet. And we are proposing to raise it up to 6 stories, 80 feet. So we are giving some thought of the development possibilities around 86th. 98th definitely shows more potential given the assets within that area. 86 right now doesn't have those same kind of assets. So keeping it at a modest height of 80 feet seemed appropriate. We were not considering the same sort of treatment that we were applying to 98th. Again, different contexts yield different approaches. So that's what our thinking was, but we're happy to reconsider what we presented. If you feel we should perhaps investigate a no limit height, or no height limit at that intersection, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Ramler-Olson. Other thoughts? Commissioner Linay?
Thank you, Chair. I have no opposition to going to no height limit at 86th and Lyndale. I mean, I do think there's a tremendous amount of potential there. I do see staff's point that there's probably more potential at 98th and Lyndale, particularly just looking at what's there. So to your point, Chair, that feeling.
Chair, if I may, there's also just it's more proximate to single-family residential, and so the application of a no height limit might be blunted by just those surrounding land uses, which would greatly limit the potential for height. But I mean, we certainly don't want to take that off the table if that's the city's appetite for development in that area. So we could reconsider what we're proposing.
I'm looking at the map here, and I agree with you that on the west side, we're pretty close to single-family homes, but on the east side, I wouldn't have concerns about that. There's a lot of industrial commercial uses over there. So I would be potentially interested in the northeast and southeast quadrants of 86th and Lyndale at no limit. And I think it's pretty unlikely we're going to get a building over 80 feet in there, but I'd rather just allow the market. If somebody wants to put a 100-story or 100-foot building there, I wouldn't want to restrict it at what we're considering one of the 2 key nodes on Lyndale. Any other thoughts on guiding question number 1? Let's move then to discussion question number 2.
Thank you, Chair. So I feel like this has already been part of the conversation already. If you have any worries, concerns, qualms with what we're proposing or with the logic framework that we applied to the proposed map, we're happy to reconsider altering it. It's not set in stone. It's not a hard and fast rule that we've adopted, so it can certainly vary. The city has, it has an interesting landscape. So what may seem appropriate in one area is, we want to take location into context, essentially. Sorry, I was about to ramble, but that's the short and sweet of it, is that we really want to take location into consideration because just one area is not like the other. And so how do we handle that, those distinctions? And so if you have any concerns about, what we used for instance, here I have it specifically for medium density residential and high density residential, but again, we were looking at even the planning areas and trying to apply a framework of, what do those plans say about development in those areas, and do you have any issues with that approach?
Mr. Ramler-Olson, could you go back to the map? I believe you have one that shows the medium density and high density residential parcels. Okay. Thoughts? Commissioner Munster.
I just have a question, and I held off on the last one thinking it fit better here. I have no issue as far as the guiding question. I think this is the appropriate way of going. I just want to be sure that I'm understanding. You said that there's no conflict with the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly how that applies. Essentially, if you meet the threshold for affordability, you just get an extra 10 feet or 1 story.
Yep.
So the map essentially, regardless of what the map says, you just get 10 feet on top. Got it. Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Certainly. Chair, Commissioner, yes, I should probably say yes instead of not, so we can actually type something in the meeting minutes.
Regarding this question specific to medium and high density residential, I think I could get myself to a place where we just say both are allowed at I believe it's 6 stories, 80 feet. I'm pretty bullish on increasing density in the city. And just the parcels I'm looking at here, I think I could get there that, look, if we're going to add more residents and people want to live here, we've got to build upwards. And I don't think a 6-story building is tremendously onerous on the surrounding use, whether it's not that far from residential or not. So like if others felt the same way, I think I could get to a place where medium density residential also falls under 6 stories, 80 feet. However, I think a fair counterpoint to that is that I'm not sure the development community is knocking on the door so loudly that the parcels we've identified for 6 stories, 80 feet is plenty for a while. And once we fill all of those up with 6-story buildings, then we look at medium density residential and in 15 or 20 years or whatever. So I think I could go either way on it, but I'm open to the idea of exploring medium density residential at 6 stories, 80 feet. But I'll look for other thoughts. Commissioner Linay? Mr. Ramler-Olson?
Oh, yeah, Chair, sorry. We're more conservative than what you're proposing because our idea is to treat medium density residential as having it have a height limit of 3 stories, 50 feet. So if we are happy to go taller based on your guidance and to look at that, just want to clarify. I mean, if I was not clear at the beginning of this, I want to be clear is that we're proposing that all high density residential have a minimum height of at least 4 stories, 60 feet, medium density residential, 3 stories, 50 feet. If you'd like them to both go to 6 stories, 80 feet, then we're happy to look at that.
One point of clarification. What we're seeing here are maximum heights, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Chair, except for how the OHO can apply, just with that caveat. The only point I was going to make about the medium density residential category, just as a reminder to folks, in the comp plan, it has a maximum density limit of 15 units to the acre right now. That might change in the next comp plan, certainly, but that's the maximum density. So in terms of seeing a building of that height, it's likely that it would exceed the maximum density allowance of the comp plan. The other thing I'd point out about the medium density category is that there are quite a few actual single-family residential areas that are guided medium density because the city has identified them as an area of transition. That doesn't mean that higher structure height is inappropriate in that area necessarily, but just clarifying that there are some medium density areas that are currently low density residential uses and are surrounded by such. In terms of the MDR mix in the city, a lot of them are townhomes. There are some low-rise apartments as well. But the comp plan explicitly does state that apartments are an acceptable or appropriate use for medium. So that's why the suggested increase in the height limit.
Commissioner Linay, I'll come back to you in a second, but I want to follow through on this. So if I'm understanding Mr. Johnson correctly, that if the commission desired that medium density residential could be at a 4-story, 60 feet, the comp plan I'm sorry, which document would not currently allow that?
Chair, if I can clarify, I think more than likely a 4-story multifamily building would likely exceed the density limitations of the medium density residential category as it's currently constructed. Doesn't mean that couldn't change in the future, but right now it's limited to 15 units per acre. Right.
So that density limit. Would you encourage Planning Commission to wait until we are reviewing the I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, is that the zoning code that precludes that density?
No, Chair, it's the comp plan.
Okay, it's the comp plan. So would you advise the Planning Commission, if we desired medium density residential for an increase in density, would you advise us to wait until we're updating the comprehensive plan? Or if that was a strong desire of the commission now, could that be wrapped into this effort?
Chair, Commissioners, I would likely wait until the comp plan is updated to effectuate the zoning code from a sequence standpoint. You typically want to amend your comprehensive plan before updating the zoning standards. One thing I will say related to that, though, is that as part of an internal conversation we've been having as staff about this tool is that the last time we looked at this was 2010 formally. And so 15 years is probably too long of a time to not make any more intentional changes to this regulatory tool. So we've been talking about ways to kind of build in more frequent, kind of akin to miscellaneous issues almost in a way of doing a more routine audit or look at this map. We have development projects that seek to re-guide individual properties. Is that a time, for example, to look at increasing the height limits, Matt, for those properties to kind of correspond with this logic framework as Tom has been describing? My recommendation, in short, to your question would be I would amend the comp plan first. That's why I think we think 3 stories, or if we 50 feet is a appropriate limit for these MDR areas that currently are capped at 2. So most of these areas are currently capped at 40-foot height limit.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Commissioner Linay, for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll go on the record as saying I'd be highly unlikely to support that. I think one thing to note, I believe I'm correct on this, is that particularly in this 98th and Normandale corridor, several of those low density or medium density back up directly to single family homes. They share, so our house backs up. And I think that would really change the character, particularly in that neighborhood. I know based on a few of them surrounding Normandale, whatever the shopping center at 98th and Normandale is called also. Those also back up to single-family homes. And I think that I'd have some real concerns about having a whole block of single-family homes have to have 6-story apartments if they wanted to suddenly now, or condos overlooking them. So I'd be hard to get me on board for that.
Very well.
Though not impossible.
And I think to Mr. Johnson's point, the comprehensive plan is a good time to relook at that where you can step the zoning down. So if we did desire 6 stories at those at those locations. You could then step it down to maybe 3-story townhouses next to that, and then you get back to the single-family zone. So that's probably a better time to do that than what we're talking about this evening. Any other thoughts on this question of recommended densities for medium and high-density residential parcels? Seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the last question, perhaps I should have reordered these questions, but because maybe this answers the other, or I mean, this would apply to the other two, is the official building height map the preferred approach to regulating building height in the city? Alternatives include within the zoning district having a height limit by use, as opposed to where we really our approach is partly based on location. So where are these areas located that where we feel comfortable with a height that we're proposing? So there's, so you have that, not exactly dueling because they can be complementary, but so it's location or it's more use-based height limits. An example of this is, if you're all familiar with form-based codes. So those are codes that are strictly focused on the form of the building and not so much on the use of the building. So that's where you see that that kind of tension being dealt with. So cities have in the United States have adopted a form-based code where they're, irrespective of the use, they allow a certain building form, or they want a certain building form to proliferate. But there's pros and cons to both approaches. The way the city of Bloomington operates is it's kind of a hybrid of those two. So there are areas that are, where uses don't allow a certain height to be exceeded. And then we've gone into great detail on certain geographic locations of the city where we have a certain development vision, where the city has they've adopted a certain development vision for an area that may actually, again, irrespective of use, want taller buildings because that fits the form of what's being desired in that area. So there are those visions of how to regulate building height. Staff's preference is we are to maintain the approach that we have, where we do take location into consideration. But happy to get your feedback on what the approach has been so far since 2010.
Thoughts? Commissioner Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I like the map. I think it's good for people that are looking to develop property to be able to easily find the map on the website, not on the zoning map, but next door. I just pulled it up, trying to load a layer. But I think that it's a good way to visually see what we're looking for height maximums in various parts of the city for someone looking to develop. Thank you.
I agree with Commissioner Cunningham. I like the map. I think the reason I like it the most is it allows for nuance and just taking treating an individual parcel as it is. As I was brought up, not all 3 parcels are the same. That's what my mom always taught me. And so I'm glad we are taking a look at this on an individual basis with the map. I think it's the right way to go. Others?
So if I may, Chair, really quickly. So I guess an argument to consider is just application. If you have a use-based height limit, it's a little easier to apply because you would just look at the use. It tells you the height limit, and that's it. You have the map. You have to find out, irrespective of the use, where the development is located, and does it make sense, and and having an argument based on like a use over there. I'm I'm proposing the same use, yet I have a lower height limit. I'm imagining the perspective of a developer. But again, that's something to consider. Staff, where our perspective is that we've seen a lot of success with our current approach, but there's arguments for and against. And so I just want to be fair to the approaches.
Okay. Do you have any more guiding questions for us, Mr. Ramler-Olson?
Chair, no, that's it.
Okay. Any final thoughts on this item? Commissioner Issa?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I know it takes a lot of time and effort to have these presentations, city staff, so thank you and the rest of the city staff that worked on this. My overall summary, or I guess what I'm in agreement with, is kind of on point one, what the Chair recommended, as well as Commissioner Cunningham, so thank you.
Any other final thoughts on this item?
Chair, can I clarify just for the record that you're referring to eliminating limitation on the number of stories, but just favoring a height-only regulation?
And Commissioner Cunningham's thoughts
Exemptions
on
and
rooftop
elevator.
equipment.
Thank you. Just want to clarify.
Anything else for us, Mr. Ramler-Olson?
No, actually, that's good. Thank you for the feedback, Chair, and members of the Planning Commission. You gave us a lot to think about, and so we'll move on to City Council in November.
Great. Thank you very much. In fact, it'll be November 17th. You will be before the City Council as a study item. We will move then to item number 3, consideration of the Planning Commission meeting minutes of October 9th. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Cunningham?
I move to adopt the Planning Commission meeting minutes for October 9th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
I will note that Commissioner Summers and Commissioner White were absent. They may wish to abstain from this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? One abstention from Commissioner Summers. We will move then to item number 4, the Planning Commission Policy and Issues Update. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cookton. Just previewing your next 2 meetings in November. So November the 6th, I should say both meetings look relatively busy agendas. On November 6th, there are 3 public hearings planned, a privately initiated city code amendment related to existing remote airport parking facilities, a city code amendment related to refuse and recycling standards. If you recall, we previously had a study session on that item. A public hearing for the American Boulevard Transit Study. Transportation staff will be coming to you seeking a formal recommendation on the findings of that study. The annual review of the city's capital improvement plan for consistency with the comprehensive plan. So that's an item that we bring to you every year as required by state law to review the city's CIP before the city council takes action on it. The last item would be potentially an action item. We're looking to have to study when the City Council adopts their final meeting schedule for next year, but shortly thereafter we bring to you a proposed meeting calendar, a meeting schedule for 2026. So that could be on the November 6th agenda and could be an action item. For those that haven't participated in that and before, we had 28 scheduled meetings this year, so that is 7 per quarter. Effectively, most months have 2 meetings, occasionally a month with 3 meetings. We'll certainly bring that, kind of past approach back to you for your feedback, and we'll go from there. On November 20th, there's also 3 public hearings currently planned. The first one, Fire Station 6 bunkhouse. The city will be the applicant in that one, seeking a variance, setback variance and final site and building plans for Fire Station 6 on Lakeview Road. There'll be a public hearing for a conditional use permit at 10901 Nesbitt for cannabis manufacturing, and then a public hearing for an interim use permit for remote airport parking at 7901 International Drive. In addition to that, 2 study items are planned. One would be an initial review of the city's fence ordinance. That's a project on the Planning Commission work plan. And then Dakota Castendale plans to bring to you the first draft of the 2026 Planning Commission work plan as a study item for your feedback. So that's the next 2 upcoming meetings. Unless there's any questions about any of that, I do have one other update, but I can pause if there's any questions.
I do have one question, Mr. Johnson. The Planning Commission work plan, might that reflect the recent conversation we had about the South Loop District?
Yes, I will. I have reiterated that to Dakota. He is aware of the Planning Commission and Council's adopted guidance in the South Loop District Plan update to study structure height and floor area ratio. It's in my inbox. I haven't looked at it quite yet. I believe it is in the draft, but I will confirm that with him tomorrow.
Thank you. Did I see a hand over here? Commissioner Cunningham?
Thank you, Chair. I might have written something. Did we have a Bloomington Ferry Road corridor study slated for sometime in the near future?
Chair, Commissioner Cunningham, thank you for that question. They removed that item from November 6th. It is going to come back to the Planning Commission. They're right now deciding whether or not to have a public hearing either here at the Planning Commission or at the City Council. So the schedule is a little bit up in the air, but it will be coming back to you for a formal recommendation in terms of a follow-up to that study item.
Thank you.
And forgive me, that'll either be on November 20th, I believe, or the first meeting in December.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you, Chair. The last item I was just going to bring up to you, and this is something that hasn't happened for some years, but given transitions on the Planning Commission and the tenure of all the members, we were contemplating some advisory boards and commissions at Bloomington have had an annual retreat. We haven't done one for the Planning Commission in some time. We certainly would want to collect your feedback if you were interested in doing something along the lines of a retreat. Other topics or questions that boards have answered is, why do we do this work? Seems like a simple question, but without actually getting around a table and discussing it with one another, sometimes it can be lost or go unsaid. So sometimes those are nice things to connect with one another about. But in addition to that, I think it's just an opportunity to connect as board members outside of the formal meeting construct or outside of this space. So I'll be sending out either a Microsoft form or a survey tool to you all to see if this activity would be something of interest to you. I think we'd be looking to roll it out in January and likely get trained facilitators to help us participate in a potential retreat or a workshop along those lines. So if you have any feedback for that now, that's great. I welcome it. But I will be sending out a survey tool on that here in the coming weeks.
Any questions on that for Mr. Johnson? We will look for that email.
Sounds good. That's all I have for you.
Very well. Is there anything else the Planning Commission would like to address this evening? Seeing none, we will conclude this October 23rd meeting of the Bloomington Planning Commission. Good night.